Get Pucked. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Matt, Dave, and Vito here, or the shade of Vito. Unfortunately, he's got some technical problems on his end with his camera, but for all those just listening, you'll hear him just fine. Vito, give us a shout.
Hey, everyone.
There you go. Smooth as butter. So we're back. Little hiatus, little scheduling issues on our end, but we're here. We're here to talk about the Canadiens. So there's been a lot of stuff, guys. There's been a ton of different things to talk about. I'm always more keen on talking about, tweaking the lineup, talking about acquisitions, who's coming, who's going, what can the team do. It's always fun to speculate, and there's a lot of interesting names out there. So one in particular, and it's topical because as of this recording, in a couple of hours' time, the Montreal Canadiens are going to be playing the Vancouver Canucks. And one of the names that's out there is Brock Boeser. Now, what do you guys feel about Brock? Is he somebody that you would like on your team? Is this a you should stay away from type guy? And if you're interested in Brock Boeser, what are you prepared to give up to get him? Dave?
It's a good question. It's tough because he's a first-round pick. He's put up 29 goals before in his career. He's I think he has like 4 or 5 seasons of 20 goals or more, oftentimes injured. So oftentimes these are 23, 24 goals in like 50-something games or 60 games or something. So he's definitely an interesting guy. I think he's a little inconsistent, and I think the injury factor is a little bit factor in there a bit. I don't know. I'm not as excited as everyone else is about Brock Boeser. I think that he's a guy who was interesting and had a lot of hype on him coming in. And I think he hasn't really lived up to it yet. And he's been, I don't know, how many seasons has he been in the NHL? He's been in the NHL for a while now. I think at least.
I feel like he's been around. Yeah, he's been around a long time. Yeah.
So I would steer clear.
Technically 7 seasons.
7 years.
His first season was only 9 games, though.
What was he drafted? Do you know where he was drafted out overall?
23rd overall in the 2015 draft.
23rd. Okay.
I just think that I would probably just stay away from him. I know he's a right winger. I mean, he would kind of fit, but he's not a guy that I would, sell the farm for. Let's say,
very few. I think it's fair to say very few players are like
right.
But for
even,
you,
yeah. One last thing is just I feel as though he wouldn't thrive in this market either. If you see kind of what's going on in Vancouver, I feel as though this is the type of team that it wouldn't be a good fit for Brock Boeser.
Okay. Fair points all around. Vito?
I think he's shown a lot of upside. He can score goals. The only issue with him, it's been injuries, and his skating's been a little bit on the slower side since he got back from his injuries. But, he's still producing some points. I'm a little surprised that they even wanted to make him a healthy scratch. He's not that bad that you have to make him a healthy scratch.
Tough love was Bruce.
I think it was
Bruce
a message.
Tough love.
It's weird. Admittedly, I haven't watched enough Vancouver games to come out and say, hey, maybe on the defensive side of the game he's terrible, but offensively still putting up decent numbers, right? I think he's 4 points shy for being a point-a-game player since his return. That being said, would I trade for him? I could only envision Montreal trading for him if it was more of a problem for problem type of situation. Some people have mentioned Jonathan Drouin for him and all that, but when you think about doing a trade like that, the issue is that Jonathan Drouin's contract comes off the books at the end of the year, and does Montreal have the appetite to take on $6.65 million for an additional 2 years after the season? And I don't think they have that appetite, considering that you're going to need cap space. I also sign Caulfield and stuff and other players.
I also suspect the Canucks are going to be looking for a little bit more than Jonathan Dvorak as a return on Brock.
Well, I don't think so anymore, Dave, because that's why they gave permission for his agents to go speak to other teams. They know they're going to basically come out at a loss with this. They'd probably rather have a pick of some kind.
Well, that's it.
Having Jonathan Drouin, right?
Yeah. You got to get something, because Jonathan Dvorak you might as well just call him a wash, because he's not going to stay in Vancouver at the end of the year. I don't think, at least. So it's going to be
for sure.
No, but like Elliot Friedman had mentioned that what Vancouver's looking for at this point is if they get something great. If not, it's more to unload the cap. They want to unload the cap more than anything else at this point.
Well,
which is crazy. Brock Boeser is that bad of a player that they had to do. They kept Louis Eriksson for forever, and he was terrible on that team.
Well, maybe they're learning from their mistakes, right? So,
they never learn from that. That organization never learns from their mistakes.
I'm on the fence too. I mean, honestly, I think you touch on something super interesting there, Vito. I think problem for problem sounds like something that's probably what a lot of teams are actively looking to do with them. They're probably fielding calls right now, like, here, take my issue and maybe a late pick, and I'll take him. And they're like, no, no, no. We know what he is. We know what we got. We have certain levels of expectation. To your point, they're probably not coming out and expecting to get full, 100 cents on the dollar sort of thing, but I don't think they're going to prepare to take a massive hit on him. I think the Drouin and like maybe something, not something huge, but something could be interesting because, to your point, if they are simply looking to unload that cap, that makes a lot of sense, right? You get a player to fill in for the time being when he's not hurt, and you unload that contract. He's for sure not going to re-sign in Vancouver, so you freed up that cap. I think ultimately it comes down to, does Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton see Boeser fitting on where they're going with this? Because they're not going to bring him in for 2 years and then let him walk, right? This upcoming offseason is supposed to be massive. We're going to have a ton of cap space on the Canadiens, and right off the bat, you're going to fill it with $6.5 million in Boeser.
But even from Montreal's perspective, right? I know David said he could kind of fit on the right wing, but can he? I mean, you have Kirby Dach up there, you have Josh Anderson, you've got Brendan Gallagher, you've got Joel Armia, like you've got the right wing's pretty clogged up at the moment. Technically,
okay, but
you even have Caulfield, who normally would play on the right wing, but he's playing on the left.
Well, you can move pieces around and get him in on that second line for sure. The other guys could be moved elsewhere. And frankly, let's be real. You named a lot of people there that are not going to be here. It's going to come the end of this trade deadline. It's just inevitable. And one name in particular, to jump to the next thing, because it is interesting. There are all these names that are out there and rumors and all that. You mentioned Josh Anderson. Now, Josh Anderson signed that big contract only a handful of years ago. It was 7 years, $5.5 million, I think. He's a 28-year-old today. I think he's in his third year of that contract. I mean, when Marc Bergevin signed this guy, it was like his prototypical perfect player, right? Power forward, big guy, strong guy. We've seen Josh Anderson do some pretty amazing things on the ice, and then you've seen him at a lot of times where you wish he can give you a little bit more on a more consistent basis. You nailed it. But my point is, seems like you got teams out there like Edmonton, like Calgary, that are actively looking for a big top six forward.
And New Jersey.
There's a ton more teams, but I know that most recently the names of the teams that were out there associated kicking the tires on Josh was Edmonton and Calgary. Do you move him, or does Josh Anderson fit in your projection of the future of this team for the next 5 years?
Okay, so there's a couple of points I want to bring up with Josh Anderson. Josh Anderson is still considered a rare type of player in the NHL. There aren't many players who can. He's a north-south type of player. He's not his hockey IQ is not very elite in that sense. But what he brings to the game is somebody who's going to be a net front presence, crash to the net when he can. He'll pot you those 20 to 25 goals a season, somewhere in the 30, 35, maybe 40 points on a good season. He's a big body guy who creates space. So you plug Josh Anderson on a team like the Edmonton Oilers, where he can potentially play with Connor McDavid and keep up with Connor McDavid's speed, you might get something there. There might be a recipe that works there. Would I move Josh? See, when we acquired Josh Anderson, we said, holy crap, Montreal needed such a big body person because we had so many small forwards. But Montreal, as you can see, they're starting to get bigger. There's not so much of a need for Josh Anderson as there was 1 or 2 years ago, with how many big players are on this roster, and they're just getting bigger as they're going along. You see Kent Hughes' skill and size and speed. There's a recipe there that they're following for players to come in the future. But if I'm going to trade Josh Anderson, they're not going to just give him up. Like, they're going to get something good in return for him.
So I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to ask this then, because if you are going to move him, I need to also throw in, what is the bare minimum you're moving him for? Like, what is the conversation starter also?
A first or an equivalent.
Like a high-end prospect, you mean?
Yeah, like a high-end prospect, a first or an equivalent. Maybe Montreal might have to take on a contract depending on who they're negotiating with, just to balance out the dollars, because at the end of the day, it is really hard for most teams that are trying to compete to take on a $5.5 million contract at this point of the year. But I don't even entertain the conversation unless there's a first or
And I know it's abstract. I'm not going to say, would you do this package? But it sounds like you're prepared to part ways with him if the deal is right. You don't
I
see him
don't
as an
want
absolute
to.
core piece.
I don't want to. The problem, I do see him as a piece to keep. The problem is that by the time Montreal is truly competitive, he's going to be a little older than we want him to be. And that's where the issue is. Because if in 3 years from now, this is when Montreal projects themselves to compete, 31 years old by no means it's not old in today's NHL in a sense. It's still good. It's still good to compete. But there's no guarantees that Montreal in 3 years from now is ready to compete. But there are teams out there that could use a Josh Anderson, who we know Josh Anderson brings a lot to the table during playoff time. And he can greatly help those teams that are competing for a cup this year.
Fair enough. Dave, you feel the same way? Or
I feel almost exactly the same way. I agree with everything he said. Wildly inconsistent. I think that when Josh Anderson first came to Montreal, it was an awakening for many fans because, wow, finally the Habs have a power forward because they've been lacking in that department forever. But they were also lacking in the goal-scoring department. They were lacking at the center ice position, and they were lacking in a guy who could put up 75 to 80 points in a season. They were lacking everywhere. So I feel as though this organization and its fan base just kind of went, wow, amazing. Josh Anderson never, power horse. We're never going to get rid of him. This is exactly what the Canadiens have needed. Okay. But it's not true. It's not really true. Sure, he serves a purpose, but the guy hasn't scored a point in like 8 games. And this happens every year. He scores in bunches. He puts up 2 goals and then he sits for 3 games, but not sits, but he doesn't produce for 3 games. And then same thing. And just to me, that's the killer in the NHL. You need people to be consistent. Inconsistency is an absolute killer. You cannot build your team around someone who's inconsistent. And so I'm okay. I've always been okay with getting rid of him and seeing what you can get for him. And I think Vito's package is probably perfect. Wow. Do not clip that. That sounded terrible. But Vito was right. You need a first or an equivalent, and you need to make it interesting for Ken Hughes in order for him to listen, because you don't necessarily need to trade him, but in my mind, you need to trade him. I think that at this point, I wouldn't see him if I'm sitting in a room with Ken Hughes and he asked me my opinion about Josh Anderson. I don't think he's the guy to continue on with this team. The team has improved. It's gotten bigger. The NHL, yes, it does still have power forwards, but not the way it used to. I think that it's fine if you get rid of Josh Anderson. And a team like Edmonton, I think it would be a great fit for Josh Anderson because he has the speed.
I think New Jersey, honestly. I know rumors were already circulating there that New Jersey has already inquired and is probably going to end up in New Jersey. But with the way they're going, they could use a player like him that's going to create some space for them, for Jack Hughes, for Nico Hischier, and just play a playoff performer. And their cupboard is so full of prospects that they can make something work with Montreal. They really, really can.
But he does have a no trade clause, I think. No,
modified.
Okay. I mean,
I can get the details on that.
Well, while you look that up, it'd be interesting just to know, just to see if there is
It's an 8-team no trade list from 2021 to 2023. And then it goes to a 5-team no trade list from 24 to 26.
Okay, so he's in the 8-team. So
I can't imagine New Jersey is going to be on that list.
I'd be surprised, but you never know. I mean, New Jersey is quite an interesting city where either people are like, "Oh yeah, it's New Jersey. It's Garden State. It's fine," or "Oh my God, I never want to go."
Out of 32 teams in the NHL, do you honestly think Josh Anderson will plug New Jersey?
I don't know. Maybe he went and had a drive through New Jersey one time and had a flat tire, and then
you can live in New York City, man. You can live in New York City. It's a train. It's an 8-minute train ride to the heart of New York City.
I think we could come up with 8 teams that are worse than New Jersey right now.
But it's not about worse teams that he's choosing not to go to.
It's a personal opinion.
His preference. It's a personal thing. Maybe he just.
But then again,
his nemesis lives in New Jersey and he doesn't want to be there.
I don't know. He could always live.
I don't know
if he sees that New Jersey. I mean, New Jersey's what first in the league. Well,
First off, he could always lift for any of the teams he picked. But I mean, it becomes an interesting issue if they end up saying, and to your point, I think going to New Jersey for the Canadiens would be best because, like you mentioned, their cupboard is probably the most stacked. They have phenomenal prospects on that team. And I'm sure Kent Hughes would do his homework and grab somebody or some ones that would really, really help bolster the up-and-coming Canadiens.
I would definitely look at Simon Nemec, even though I don't.
You're never going to get Nemec. You're never going to get him. You're never going to get him. So I wouldn't even look at him. Don't even look at him. Don't window shop. There's no point. But I will say this. I mean, again, we're talking now. I could bring up the Armias and I can bring up guys like this where like maybe they get flipped for something, but that frankly is not interesting enough. I think another name that is fascinating. Right now, man. Well, and they're very low in value, but one guy who is very high in value. And I still think this conversation is funny, but I mention it anyways for our listeners' listening pleasure. Sean Monahan. There is a strong contingent of people out there that are suggesting that the Canadiens should give this guy term and money and not flip him at the trade deadline. Explain to me in your best way possible, playing devil's advocate for both sides of that equation, why would the Canadiens keep Sean Monahan and give him term and money, and why would they look to trade him at the trade deadline, and what would they get for him? Start with you, Dave.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think the argument for trading him is easy. I mean, I think his value is high. I think that you could get what you want from him. I think that he probably wasn't part of the plan in the first place. I think that the center ice position, you look at it, it could be filled. So, you have a little bit of movement there, and you could probably get a really decent return for a player who's, still small sample size. Sure, he's back from injury and he's playing well, but I mean, still, he's back from a very severe injury that I don't, you can't really trust full on out. So I think that's the argument for trading him, and I'm kind of in that camp. I think that would move him. You kind of have a Christian Dvorak there anyway. Like you'd have to either move one or the other. I would say, and I think that at this point,
Monahan's value is more than Dvorak.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you going to get for Christian Dvorak? With all due respect, so I think you can move him, and that's.
Can you get a first? Sorry. Can you get a first?
Yes.
Because that's what's on everybody's
list. It just might not be at 2023.
Guys, I am no longer okay. Where's this thing that I put up here a long time? Here we go. Okay, I am no longer. Oh, sorry, let me put it back. Let me put this back. Okay, that's the truth. Okay, because I'm no longer saying you can't get first. Like look, Ben Sherratt. Ben Sherratt got first round pick. How? What was I telling you guys? That would be the stupidest thing you could do. I was advocating they'll never get a first round pick for Ben Sherratt. I was wrong because NHL general managers are desperate and dumb, and they become even dumber when the more desperate they are. And I think Sean Monahan provides instant value. I think they could easily get a first round pick or equivalent. Look at even Artturi Lehkonen. I didn't think he'd get anything. Justin Barron. You could talk all you want about his value right now, but at the time, very good trade. So I think that's the argument for trading him. The argument for keeping him is a guy who put up 30 goals. I mean, obviously there's definitely an argument for keeping him, but I just don't subscribe to that sort unless he blows me away. I get that he's playing well, but I don't understand the whole hype about keeping him. And oh my God, Sean Monahan, put aside that they got a first round pick for taking him in. I think had he just come in on a normal trade, I don't think we would be this excited about him. I mean, he's not killing it. Don't get me wrong. He's playing well, but I'm not in that camp.
He's doing far greater than I think most people expected him to do. He's showing flashes of what he did a couple years ago.
Yes,
when he was putting up the big numbers, no doubt. I can appreciate and understand people's desire to keep him. He's also he's a likable guy. I mean, it seems like already he's a darling with the fans. Fans just for whatever reason gravitate towards certain players, and he's just one of them. Maybe it's the redemption arc from his injuries and coming back and doing his thing, and the fact that he was, packaged with a first to be taken, and now he's showing up the world. People like that story too. I'm in agreement with you. I can see obviously there is some arguments to be made, but I think it is crazy to weigh them equally. I mean, you got him for free. You got a first to get him, and now he could potentially net you another first. How could you possibly fathom not trading him? At which point he becomes a UFA. Now, I know it's probably never going to happen to trade him for a first and then re-sign him, but it is possible.
His name's not Thomas Plekanec. It's not happening.
It's true. But it is possible. Now, he won't have been here long enough to really put roots down, but maybe, the team trends up. They talk to him. They say, Sean, this is what we're going to do, man. This is what we're going to do. We want you to be full aware of our plan. We want you to get a chance. We're going to trade you to a contender. We're going to probably get a first back and some stuff that's better for us. We need it, but we loved you. We love you. And when you're done and you're in the offseason, answer the phone. You don't have to come to us, but answer the phone. And I'm sure he would. So that's why I'm in camp. You have to trade him. As much as I also like Sean Monahan, I think I've always liked him, even when he played for the Flames. But you got to do it.
So okay, to bring up both sides of the coin there. When Philip Danault was traded, he was 28 years old, and everybody was like, for $5.5 million, they traded a second-line center who can play defensive game and do all these things, and he was good for the team and good. He was a leader in his own right and whatnot.
Good Chinu.
And good Chinu on top of that. Fast forward a couple of years later, Sean Monahan is basically, like you said, he was a throw-in on a trade. We got the first-round pick. There's that redemption arc and all that, and he brings some similarities to what Danault brought. He's good defensively. He's got a bit more offensive flair than Danault does, and offensive potential than Danault does. But he's 28 years old, and it comes out to that same similar concept of when we had Danault, who was a good, solid 2C. Plug him in there, and you have him. In addition, Monahan is a good leader. I mean, you heard Daryl Sutter when he said if he was still in Calgary, he'd be the captain of the team. So when people are mentioning why they should keep him, is you're looking at a guy who's probably going to sign for anywhere between 5.8 to 6.2 million in that ballpark there, and you're like, okay, you have somebody to back up Suzuki to be the 2C to cement that position and the story, and you don't have to worry about if Kirby Dach is not a center next year, it's going to be Christian Dvorak as our 2C, because that's what you have. We can't predict maybe they'll acquire somebody, we have no idea, and maybe they'll re-sign Monahan next year, we don't know. So there's that side to when you think about keeping him, and you're thinking the numbers he's putting up, and you almost can see that he's almost, I wouldn't say back to his old self, but he's productive enough.
He's playing very well.
Right?
I think anybody wants.
And he's fitting in. He's doing what he's not a problem in the room or whatever, and it'll help. Also, like I said, Nick Suzuki, it'll insulate him a little more, and not have to worry about shit. He's got to focus on both. 1C being the guy at all times. Now, the other side of the coin. Yes, they got him for free. He was a throw-in. And you can get another first for it on what is likely to be one of the best drafts since 2003 is what they're saying. The question is are they going to get a 2023 first-round pick, or is our team's going to try to give a 2024 or 2025? And at that point, is it even worth it? Or are we going for an equivalent, right? At the same time, it's still a first-round pick. It's still more assets that you're adding, and it's a nice look when you look at it and say, "Hey, we got we basically got 2 first-round picks for taking Sean Monahan." It's really nice to look at that when you look at it on paper.
You can't lose that side of the argument.
So
if you trade him for a first, you can't lose it because you got 2 first.
I think it's a win-win. But there's just one side of the coin that for some people is winning a little more. But
ultimately it would come down to the same thing, right? I mean, frankly, you could, in theory, draft 2 guys in the first round with both those picks and they both become busts. I mean, you never really know when it comes to draft picks. But to your point, 2023's draft is supposed to be incredibly deep. But that also indicates to me another interesting fact, which might be how many teams do you foresee actually trading their first of this upcoming draft? Or are they going to try to really push for the 2024 onwards?
Well, don't make Dave put up that screenshot again.
Don't make me tap the sign.
Don't make me tap the sign. Because it's been proven time and time again, every time there's a team that thinks that they're that close, they're that one player away from truly competing or winning the Stanley Cup, they're going to trade their first-round picks. Because at the end of the day, if they do win that cup, that first round that they were going to draft won't matter. They won the cup. They're like exempt for the next couple of years. So
the thing is, and we call GMs dumb, but GMs don't like a draft pick to a general manager who's like in win now mode is useless, right? Because it's either you're going to win or you're going to get fired. Like, for example, Kyle Dubas in Toronto, like he doesn't care about that draft pick that's going to pan out in 6 years. Like, what does he care about that? He needs to win now. And there's a lot of GMs in that situation where they need to win now. They're not going to be around in 6 years to cultivate that first-round pick that you just got. So they need to move that first-round pick. So I think that a lot of general managers, you saw it already. Florida already dealt their first-round pick. And the year hasn't even started. I think that maybe they'll think twice about it, but I think at the end of the day, the closer you get to that trade deadline, the more you're going to see willingness to part with it. Now, the thing is, it depends on what the needs of these teams are, right? Like maybe they won't need a center like Sean Monahan. It depends on what the teams that are in contention, what piece they're missing, and if they could fit him.
I could see Colorado really needing a 2C right now.
It's funny because the Canadiens have a lot of different players that they're going to be prepared to part ways with that could fit a wide variety of different things. You got guys that can plug on your bottom six that they're prepared to trade, and you got guys that can plug on other teams' top six, and they're prepared to trade them as well. Like, it's interesting. It's really a buffet when it comes to looking at the Canadiens of players of what's available. You have very, very few non-touchables, and then the rest is kind of like, okay, you want this guy, no problem.
But that's the thing, right? The players that Montreal has are typically players that at the trade deadline, a lot of teams that are contending tend to have an appetite for.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's interesting.
You're looking at someone like Christian Dvorak, and you're saying, okay, he's not going to net you a first. He probably won't get you a first. But there's a lot of teams out there that feel like, okay, we need that guy who's going to play as a 3C who can bring a defensive game, and this will be his role. We've seen him as a right piece for the rest of our core, and they're going to bring him in, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But, and we look at it from Montreal's perspective, and we're like, yeah, I'll give Dvorak tomorrow for a stack of pucks. You know what I mean? Like, at least some people in the fan base would.
This podcast loves Dvorak. What are you talking about?
Right? So it's there's a lot of pieces in Montreal. Like, I mean, there was even rumors earlier on about how you look at the Joel Armia, and he's like, okay, he's somebody that you can bring in, you know exactly what you're going to get, and he plugs in on your third or fourth line. And teams would be willing to maybe acquire him if Montreal retains a crap ton of salary on that and just, and works with it. But who knows? That's an interest. It's going to be an interesting trade deadline for the Montreal Canadiens. Because like you said, it's a buffet. There's a lot of pieces that teams could pry out of Montreal that for Montreal, maybe they'd want to part ways with, but for those teams, that's a piece that I think could just take us that other little level.
Oh, I'm 100% in agreement. I think this is going to be, without a doubt, one of the most exciting trade deadlines, and then off seasons in probably many years.
Since the last off season.
Well, yeah, the last off season was pretty good too. But I mean, just in general, the sheer amount of money that's going to come off the books this off season, it really is going to allow Kent Hughes and Gorton to really put their stamp on the team. I mean, it's even more so than they've already done, which is really fun. But another thing of sort of in recent recent news. I mean, it's literally going to happen tomorrow, which is fun. But what do you guys feel about Seattle and Shane Wright, who was been healthy scratched all the time, has like 8 seconds of NHL game time
7
this
NHL
year.
games.
Yeah, okay. And in each game, he played like 4 or 5 minutes or some nonsense. I mean, their utilization of him has been insane. But I'm not even going to get into that can of worms. I'm simply saying, how do you guys feel about the fact that after not playing him for so long, putting him on that conditioning stint that times up perfectly with at the end of the 2 weeks, he's called back up for the game against the Canadiens? Is this, I mean, it's silly to even ask you, but I mean, was this done on purpose, or is this just one of those fun hockey coincidences that we're going to have Slafkovsky against Wright, in the upcoming game?
I think it was a little bit of done on purpose. I think that, you put him down, you're kind of disappointed. I don't know exactly how Seattle Camp feels about him, but, they probably expected him to jump in right away. He didn't really, scratched a whole bunch, put down for a conditioning stint. And then you kind of look at the schedule and you're like, okay, well, we got to call him up soon. And then you're like, the Habs are there. He's going to have a chip on his shoulder. He's going to want to do well against the Habs. Why not see what he's made of and put him in? That would be my reasoning if I were a general manager in the NHL or a coach on the coaching staff. I'd say, why not? Why not put him against and see what he has? Because these are games that could define you, right? It's always interesting when the Canadiens get a player, how they play against teams like the Leafs and the Bruins, right? As soon as you get a new player in, my first thought is I want to see how he plays in these rivalry games. And this is the type of thing. You're going to see what you have in Shane Wright. How is he going to play when all eyes are on him, when he's going to be playing against the Canadiens, a team that passed? He should have all the motivation in the world to be at his top. Now, you're probably putting him in a terrible position because...
Well, and that's my point. Like, isn't it not fair to the kid? I mean, I have nothing personal against Shane Wright. I was on board to take him first overall. Like I don't care about all the nonsense that happened in the draft, but I'm just thinking of it about that, like exactly that perspective. You call him up, you jack him up about it. You say, this is the team that passed on you. That big kid over there, they took him over you. This is the game. This is the one you're going to go in. We're going to bump you up from fourth line to second line. And then what happens?
What the heck? Did you just watch Any Given Sunday? What is this speech?
Yeah,
But seriously. And then what happens to the poor kid? You put him out there. He ends up getting a -2 on the night, no points. Slavkovsky scores in the game, and his entire world shatters. Is that the right thing to do?
But I mean, okay, you went the glass half empty kind of scenario. But what if it's the opposite? What if he's plus 2 in his first 2 goals?
Guys, this is the NHL. Like, I to be honest, like you're a big boy. You play. I don't care if you're put in a bad position. You know what I mean? Like you're playing an NHL game. Like, fine, maybe you won't score a hat trick in your game against the Canadiens. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be a -2. Maybe Slavkovsky will score. It's how you react afterwards. What the next game? Are you gonna? Is your world gonna shatter like Matt says, and you're gonna be a terrible NHL for the rest of your life? Well, then you know what you have in Shane Wright. You can't coddle these players like you need to see how they perform in difficult situations. They're going to eventually want to win you. You're going to want them to win an elimination game in the Stanley Cup final. So this is going to be nothing compared to that.
Oh boy, did we lose Matt?
I think we lost Matt.
Is it me, Shane?
Oh, you're back. You're back.
You're back.
All right. We're all back. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I don't know what you were saying.
I was just saying, like, you're going to want him to win you an elimination game in the Stanley Cup final. That's why you drafted him where in the first overall. You know, where he was expected to go first overall. I know, but he was expected to go first overall. You use your first round pick on him is because you eventually down the line is going to be a key piece of it. That's your vision. So you need to see how he deals under pressure. A game number 32 against the Montreal Canadiens shouldn't be that daunting. I know
but that isn't that my point. But you're kind of like making my point also. It's like, yes, you want him to come up and you want him to do well. And you're right. It's the NHL, and when they called him up from this conditioning stint, if it were any other team, yeah, he should be put in. And now you're back, kid, and you better produce. I just feel like it's a little odd to me that after all the stuff that they've been doing with him throughout the season, which for the majority of people I think has been pretty head scratching, like, why are you scratching him all the time? How is it that you can't find a spot for him to play some games? And if he isn't going to play games, why don't you send the kid down? All that aside, when they do decide to finally bring this kid up, they put him in like the biggest spotlight you could possibly put him in.
But guys,
you're right. In the middle of the season on game 38,
when it means nothing. I didn't say anything. This is Matt. All right.
So, right, but Matt, like the guy, he went on a tour afterwards of saying how disappointed he was that he wasn't picked first overall. That he's going to use it as motivation. Put your money where your mouth is, man. This is the perfect opportunity for you to do it. I get it, man.
It could be.
And it's not as if we're thinking it from the Montreal media perspective of things, you know. Nobody else in the
media
league
that counts.
No, but you get it. If he goes a -2 and Slavkovsky scores, you know who's going to care? Montreal fans and Montreal media. You think like other fans around the league are going to care? No. Game 47, no one's remembering that this even happened.
It's a story.
There will be.
It's a story for a day, maybe.
Yeah.
No one really cares. No one is going to.
I bet you Shane Wright will care. I bet
Sure.
you he's gonna care a lot if he doesn't perform very well that game.
Well, then perform. You're in the NHL. That's what you're paid to do. That's what you're drafted to do.
From the Shane Wright perspective.
Okay, easy there, Poos Buja. Easy.
Are you Shane Wright's uncle or something? Are you Shane Wright's cousin? What's going on?
I'm just saying. I thought it curious that given where they're at, and Seattle is doing very well right now. They're actually at the top of the league, like amongst the top of the league of the teams, which is crazy, but they are. And the Habs, let's be real, are towards the near bottom tier. And with all that's going on, that's well. To add the kerosene to the fire that you're purposely creating. You're starting a fire and you're adding kerosene to it. I find it interesting. This is a very big thing. I'm sure it's going to be touted. All the other medias are going to catch on. You're right. It'll be a 24-hour news thing, but it's going to be a big thing. And it's funny, the majority of Habs fans will likely not even watch this game because it's going to be, I think, at 10 o'clock, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. I don't know. I find it interesting.
But you're only looking from the Shane Wright perspective. What if Slavkovsky wants to prove that he should have been taken first overall, and he's the one who's having the heck of a night?
But he doesn't factor into it. It's a Seattle decision.
Yeah, exactly. It has nothing to do with Slavkovsky at all. I mean, if anything, Slav has already proved like he looks like he fits in. Granted, he's got a lot to improve on, no doubt, but he looks like he could be at the show. He's not out of place. He has a couple goals already. Like
I will say his last couple of games, especially since he got bumped up to the second line.
Oh, it's like incredible.
You could see. I think maybe there's some weight that he shed. He's starting to get his NHL legs a little bit, not completely. Yeah. Still got to work on his acceleration a little bit this offseason. But just to say, he doesn't he doesn't look as slow or as out of place as he did the first few games of the season.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, that's
good analysis on Shane Wright, Vito. Well done.
Oh,
Thank
Sikorsky.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, it's just these are fun storylines. Don't get me wrong. I like that it's happening because it gives us things to kind of talk about and to be like, why? But it is fun.
From Seattle's perspective, this is like bonus. It's found money, right? They weren't expecting to compete this early on this year. Like I'm sure they weren't expecting to be where they are in the standing. So for them, they're just probably having fun, man. They're just like, hey, what's going on? What else can we do to see if this works? And why not bring Shane Wright up and see how he fits in?
Whatever gets fans happy, spending money, ticket sales, especially for an expansion team like that that's so new to the NHL. Do what you got to do to create any storyline, any form of marketing.
So here's a follow up to that because again, right, Slafkovsky and Seattle have nothing to do with each other, right? Yeah. This is a Shane Wright Montreal thing. Do the fans in Seattle boo every time Slav touches the puck?
It would be stupid.
But will they do it?
Again, anything that gets the fans to get engaged into a hockey game and bring that excitement, and if it creates some form of rivalry between the two teams or some tension, do it. Because at the end of the day, we know, and everybody knows, doesn't matter what fan you are of what team, you get Montreal Canadiens involved, your team's being or your players being spoken about for a few days. And that's the tension that they'll take all day, every day.
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, see, I don't really know. Like Seattle's fan base, obviously for football, the Seahawks, right? Like legendary, right? Like legendary fan base. Because the Kraken sucked last year, like we don't really know yet how their fans are. We saw Vegas born, and you know what I mean? Like people are, they have a cool, fun, engaged fan base. I don't know. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not even sure what Seattle's fan base looks like. I'm going to have to watch the game, I guess, and see how they do it. I don't think they'll boo him. I don't think so. I don't think.
Given that you don't really get a whole lot of sleep, I expect you to watch that game tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
I'll watch it. I'll be watching.
Good stuff, boys. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, everybody. Again, as always, you know the drill. We appreciate. Thanks so much. If you could share, like, pass it on, subscribe, all that jazz. And I keep mentioning it, we're trying to nail down a more consistent schedule, so stay tuned for that. And obviously, we're always on our primarily on Twitter, commenting throughout the games, throughout the week as well. So feel free, if you catch anything there, just any little tidbit that might get posted, and you guys have some comments, we like to engage with you also. So please feel free to do so. And with that, we say thanks very much. So for Dave and Vito, who you can't see, and myself, this was Get Pucked.